They say moving into a new house is supposed to be a fresher start, a new chapter. But what if the house had its own unfinished story, and you were just the next characters trapped inside it? What starts with harmless noises soon escalates into something darker, something watching from the shadows, something that knows you're there. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Night Terror X. Tonight I'm bringing you a chilling true story, or rather 3 terrifying experiences woven into one. A young family, a once abandoned house, loyal dogs who sense what humans can't, and an unsettling stranger who seems to appear and disappear at will. Some doors once opened should never be shut again. If you're ready for a night of fear, hit that like button to support the channel. Share your thoughts and theories in the comments. And if you have a real-life horror story of your own, email it to nightterrorxinbox@gmail.com. Now, get comfortable, but stay alert. Something might be watching, just like it watched them. The house that never let go. So one night after a few beers around a bonfire, my buddy Lucas told me something that's stuck in my head ever since. He said, "Man, there's this one house I lived in when I was a kid, and to this day, it still haunts my dreams." When Lucas was about 13, his family moved into a rental, an old weather-beaten place built sometime around 1910. They were supposed to stay just a few months while their new home was getting finished. From the outside, the house didn't look that bad. Small, a little crooked, but nothing screamed haunted. Still, the first time Lucas walked through the door, he said he felt this weight in the air, like the whole place was breathing, but shallow, like it was holding something back. The first night, even though it was a hot July evening, the inside of the house felt cold. Not refreshing, not comfortable, just cold. Like standing in the shade of something huge and invisible. Lucas tried to shake it off. They had moved so many times when he was a kid that feeling unsettled had become almost normal. He figured it would pass. His parents' bedroom was downstairs, and Lucas shared the second floor with his 2 brothers. The staircase leading up was brutally steep, so steep that Lucas lost his footing and tumbled down them more times than he could count. He joked later that it felt like the house wanted him to fall. Anyway, that first night he couldn't sleep. The darkness felt thicker somehow, like it pressed against him. He lay there listening as loud, uneven footsteps pounded up and down the staircase over and over. Clunk, clunk, clunk. It went on for hours. He figured it was just one of his brothers moving stuff around. It was annoying, but not enough to get out of bed over. The next morning, during breakfast, Lucas decided to poke fun at his brother for making so much noise. But before he could even bring it up, his brother beat him to it, asking, "Dude, what were you doing running up and down the stairs all night?" Lucas said he went cold all over. He had assumed it was him. They both just stared at each other for a second. Nobody wanted to be the one to say it first, so they laughed it off like it was nothing. But Lucas said he could tell his brother wasn't laughing for real. A few days later, Lucas was home alone, parents at work, brothers hanging out with friends. It was just after noon, summer sunlight bright outside, but the house felt dim inside, like always. He decided to take a shower. Before heading to the bathroom, he turned on the TV in his room, just to have some background noise. You know that feeling when a house is too quiet, like the silence itself is listening? He stepped out of the shower about 15 minutes later and froze. The house didn't sound right. He heard a TV playing loudly upstairs. Weird, because his was supposed to be the only one on, and it definitely wasn't his room. Lucas wrapped a towel around himself and crept down the hall. The sound was coming from his brother's room, door shut, TV blaring. His brother wasn't even home. He nudged the door open with his foot, and sure enough, the TV was on. A static-filled channel was flashing random images. Lucas turned it off fast, heart pounding. But then he noticed his own TV, the one he'd left on before his shower, was now completely off. That's when the noise started downstairs. It wasn't just one TV now. It was every TV in the house. The one in the living room, the one in his parents' room, all blaring at full volume. Lucas didn't even go check them all. He just grabbed his clothes, sprinted out of the house barefoot, and didn't stop running until he got to the end of the driveway. He told himself it was just an electrical problem. Probably nothing, right? Right. Lucas said the weirdest thing wasn't even the TVs or the stairs. It was his mom's voice. Every now and then, when he was alone, he would hear her calling him. Not distant, not muffled like from another room, but crystal clear, like she was standing right behind him, just around the corner. He'd call back, but nobody answered. When he ran outside to find her, she'd be in the garden or chatting with a neighbor, nowhere near the house. And every time he told her about it, she just smiled and said he had an overactive imagination. Mom's, right? Years later, even after moving out, even after the house was sold and bulldozed, Lucas couldn't shake it. He started having dreams about that place, over and over. And in the dreams, he's not a kid anymore. He's exactly the age he is now, walking back into the house like he never left. In the dreams, the lights never work. No matter how many switches he flips, nothing happens. The doors slam open on their own, like someone's running through the house, just barely out of sight. Somewhere, always out of reach, a piano plays a slow, sad tune he can never quite recognize. And the stairs, those damn stairs. In the dreams, he climbs them, but they just go on forever, spiraling higher and higher without ever reaching a second floor. Lucas said he's had that dream 7, maybe 10 times in just the past 2 weeks. He doesn't even know why. It's not like he even thinks about the house during the day. But every time he wakes up from one of those dreams, he swears he can feel that cold weight again, like something's still following him, waiting just outside the door. And the worst part, last week, when he woke up, he could swear, just swear, he heard the faintest clunk, 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 coming from the hallway. Hey, if you ever hear footsteps on your stairs in the middle of the night, maybe don't check. Just stay in bed. The Man at the Gate. A few weeks ago, I was swapping creepy stories with my cousin Ethan after a late-night drive, and he told me something that seriously messed with my head. He said, "There was this one weekend when I thought I was just being paranoid, until it almost wasn't." Earlier this year, Ethan's family packed up and moved from a quiet little town to an old farmhouse out in the sticks. It wasn't totally isolated, just a 10-minute drive from the nearest gas station. But it felt like the middle of nowhere once the sun went down. There were only 2 houses on their road, and the other family was in the process of moving out, so most nights it was just empty. After getting settled, life fell into a routine. Ethan's parents both worked long hours, so weekdays meant he stayed at a friend's after school until they could pick him up. Weekends, though, he was usually home alone. His brother, Zach, spent most weekends passed out in his room, claiming he needed recovery time from his crazy school schedule. Ethan didn't mind the solitude. Most days it was just him, his 2 dogs, and whatever random chores needed doing around the place. One Saturday, his parents decided to head out to a friend's get-together a few towns over. They wouldn't be back until late. Zach was home, but had made it very clear he didn't want to be bothered for anything short of the house catching fire. So basically, Ethan had the entire place to himself from sunrise to who knew when. It was around 6 p.m. when Ethan noticed how quickly it was getting dark. The kind of twilight where everything outside starts looking fuzzy around the edges, just vague shapes and shadows. He was upstairs scrolling through his phone when a pair of headlights caught his eye, moving slowly down the dirt road toward their house. At first, he figured it was no big deal. Maybe the neighbors had come back for a last load of stuff before their move. He went back to his phone without giving it much more thought. But less than 2 minutes later, both of his dogs downstairs exploded into barking. Deep, frantic barks that he knew meant something was wrong. You know how sometimes your gut just drops into your shoes? That's exactly what Ethan felt, like someone had punched him from the inside out. He forced himself to go downstairs. Most of the house was dark, except for a few dim lamps in the living room. Following the noise, he found his younger dog standing rigid by the front window, barking like he wanted to rip something apart. The older dog circled the room, growling low and steady. Ethan edged toward the window, peeled back a corner of the curtain, and his stomach twisted into a knot. A car sat idling just beyond the driveway, engine rumbling low. The headlights were off, but the vehicle was still running. Worse yet, the front gate, which Ethan knew he had latched earlier, was hanging wide open. At first, he didn't see anyone. Then, his eyes caught movement. A figure standing just beyond the stone wall, partially hidden in the dimness. A man, tall, wearing a dark jacket and a cap pulled low over his face. He was scanning the house, slowly moving his gaze from window to window, like he was counting. Ethan didn't move, didn't even breathe. He just stood there, frozen, watching the man. And then suddenly, the guy's head snapped toward the window where Ethan was peeking out. Their eyes locked. Ethan swore the man's whole body jolted in surprise. His expression twisted into something between anger and panic. In one sudden motion, the man spun on his heel and sprinted back toward the car. Heart hammering, Ethan turned and bolted up the stairs. He crashed into Zach's door, yelling for him to wake up. The dogs barked louder, the whole house seeming to vibrate with the chaos. By the time Zach staggered downstairs, rubbing his eyes, the car was already speeding away, tires kicking up gravel. They stood at the window, watching the red taillights disappear down the road. Neither of them spoke for a solid minute. Eventually, Ethan called their parents. An hour later, they came rushing home, but when he explained everything, they just waved it off. Probably someone who got lost, his dad said. No need to freak out. He almost let it go, told himself he'd overreacted, until 3 days later, when he heard the news at school. Someone mentioned a string of robberies that had happened the same night, people hitting isolated farmhouses just like his. A lot of places were cleaned out. A few others had doors kicked in while families were still inside. Ethan's house, somehow, hadn't been hit. Maybe because he was standing there when the man looked in, maybe because of the dogs, or maybe because something scared that guy enough to make him think twice. Ever since, Ethan's gotten into the habit of locking every door and window, even when the sun's still up. And every time his dogs start barking at nothing, or a strange car creeps down the road, he wonders if someday, next time, it'll be too late to to stop whatever's out there. Hey, if you ever move out to the country, maybe do yourself a favor. Listen to your dogs. They might be the only warning you get. The Man in the Brown Suit. So a buddy of mine, Chris, told me something that's been haunting him ever since he moved into this old house a few months back. And honestly, after hearing it, I can't stop thinking about it either. Chris had always been close with his older sister, so when she had her baby boy and needed an extra hand, he didn't hesitate to move in. They found a crazy cheap rental on the east side of Fairhope, an old town where time seemed to have stopped somewhere around the 1950s. Their landlord bragged about how he'd just fixed up the place. But honestly, it still smelled like old wood and forgotten memories. For $120 a month, though, they weren't going to complain. The first couple of weeks went by fine. Chris, his sister, the baby, their 2 pit bulls, and his lazy old tabby cat all settled in. It wasn't perfect, but it felt safe. Until it didn't. One night they were just hanging out, TV buzzing low in the background, when both dogs suddenly stiffened. Chris said it was like someone flipped a switch. Their ears shot up, their fur bristled, and they started this deep, throaty growl that didn't sound anything like their usual barking at cars or squirrels. It was primal, protective, dangerous. Before Chris could even say anything, they heard it. A loud thud upstairs, heavy like a body dropping. His sister froze, clutching the baby tighter. Chris grabbed a flashlight and crept upstairs, heart pounding so hard he swore the whole staircase could hear it. He checked the nursery, the bathroom, his sister's bedroom. Nothing. Everything was untouched, not a bin out of place. He tried to laugh it off, convincing himself maybe something had shifted inside a closet. Halfway back down the stairs, it happened. A thunderous pounding on the front door. Chris swore the whole house shook. The dogs erupted, barking like they wanted to tear through the wood. His sister bolted toward the baby's room, while Chris edged down the hallway toward the door, trying to peer through the little window beside it. Nothing. Just the cracked streetlights and the empty sidewalk. Chris opened the door, adrenaline surging. No one was there. The next few nights were quiet, but the tension in the air stayed, heavy, watching. Then Friday rolled around. Chris remembered because he had the weekend off and was dreaming of a full 2 days of sleep. They were eating dinner in the living room when the dogs started again. That same low, menacing growl. This time, staring at the door leading to the basement, the one where Chris's bedroom was. At that exact moment, the baby giggled and pointed at the door, like he saw something funny. Chris said he laughed nervously too, brushing it off, until the basement door violently swung open with a slam so hard it punched a hole straight through the wall. Before he could even move, the door swung shut again with a force that rattled the whole hallway. His sister screamed, ran upstairs, and locked herself in her room with the baby. Chris stood frozen, staring at the basement door, wondering if he dared open it. The next morning, Chris tried to shake it off. Maybe it was just the house settling, old wood playing tricks, right? He sat on the couch, flipping through channels, when the dogs suddenly lunged toward the side window. Chris got up and saw him, a man standing on their side porch. The guy looked like he'd walked straight out of an old 1930s mugshot. Brown pinstripe suit, tilted fedora, and an eerie stillness about him. He wasn't knocking, wasn't even moving, just staring. Chris almost opened the door, but something in him said not to. Instead, he watched until the man finally turned and walked around the corner of the house, disappearing without a sound. After that, The noises started. Every night, distant banging upstairs, footsteps in the hallway, whispers through the vents. The dogs would bark into empty corners. The baby would babble toward the dark like he was talking to someone they couldn't see. A few days later, Chris came home from work, and there he was again. The man in the brown suit, standing on the porch, not a wrinkle in his clothes, staring straight ahead like a statue. Chris decided enough was enough. He stormed up to the guy and said, "Hey, you need something?" No response. Not even a blink. Chris took a step closer, the anger rising in his chest. "If you don't get off my property, I'm calling the cops," he snapped. That's when the man finally moved. He turned slowly, revealing a face so pale it looked like a wax figure. His blue eyes were ringed with deep purple shadows, the way a corpse might look after days without sleep. No emotion, no humanity. Then, without a sound, he turned and walked off the porch toward the backyard. Chris ran after him, but when he rounded the corner, the man was gone, not walking away, not hiding behind a tree, just gone. Chris burst into the house, heart racing, telling his sister what happened. She paled immediately. She said the dogs had been barking nonstop for the last half hour, staring at the windows, but when she looked outside, she hadn't seen anyone. After that, it got worse. Chris started dreaming of the man. Dreams so real he'd wake up drenched in sweat, feeling like he had just seen him standing at the foot of his bed. Some nights he'd wake up and swear he could still smell the faint scent of old cologne lingering in the room. Then came the worst night. Chris was laying in bed, refusing to open his eyes because he already knew what he'd see. But finally he cracked one eye open, and there he was, inside the room. The man in the brown suit, standing silently by the door, hat casting a long shadow across the floor, watching him. Chris shot up, gasping, but the man didn't move, didn't blink. And then, without a sound, he vanished. Chris swears he still sees him sometimes. Reflections in windows, flickers in crowds, in the blank stares of strangers passing by. The man in the brown suit is always there, watching, waiting,